Hello, student. Good morning. Today class is History, Chapter 1, Tracking Changes Through a Thousand Years. Okay, today each class start for the Chapter 1 and listening and see the video complete lesson first. Now start the lesson first. Okay, now start the.
We will start Chapter 1 of History textbook for class 7 students. The name of the chapter is Tracing Changes Through 1,000 Years. Now, before starting, I know that some of you don't like history, but I feel that history is one of the more interesting subjects, and I've made huge efforts to make this playlist as interesting and as illustrative as possible. So, let's start. Now, this chapter is very important in the sense that it contains the crux of the whole textbook. In class 7th, we will study the events that occurred between 700 CE and 1750 CE. CE means Common Era, similar to AD. In 1100 CE, there was a king. The king wanted to update the world map. So what did he do? Did he update it himself? No. Since he was a king, so he had many ministers in his court. One of them was cartographer Al-Idrisi. He asked Al-Idrisi to update the map. Now, why did he ask Al-Idrisi? The answer is because Al-Idrisi was a cartographer. Now, what is cartography? Cartography is the art and study of making maps. And a cartographer is a person who makes maps. So since Al-Idrisi was a cartographer and he had to update the map, so he sent various people to travel around the world and gather information. And using that information, he created the world map in 1154 CE. So Al-Idrisi's map had certain characteristics. Let's study them. It was used by many travelers and explorers such as Vasco da Gama. In his map, he showed South India at North India's place and Sri Lanka on top of India. So in a way, his map was flipped upside down. And lastly, as you already know, the map was made in 1154 CE. It's the first map in your chapter 1 of NCERT. You do not need to memorize it. Now, since this map is not perfect, so we will study another map, which is the second map given in your chapter 1 of NCERT. And it is the same map which you are seeing on your screen right now. This map was made by French cartographer, or we can say French map maker, Guillaume Delisle. Now, it was made 600 years after map 1. That is, it was made 600 years after Al-Idrisi's map. It was made in 1720s. In this map, the coastal areas of India are very detailed. As you can see, it almost looks like India's current map. Now, what is a coast? A coast is an area where there is a transition between land and water. So, for example, at this point, on the left there is land and on the right there is water. So, this is a coast because there is a transition between land and water. So, as you can see, the coastal areas are very well defined. So, this is the advantage of this map. Also, this map was used by many European sailors on their voyages. So, students, if I ask you a question that which map is better, so what will you answer? Yes, map 2 made by French cartographer Guillaume Delisle is better. because in map 1 it was almost flipped upside down, meaning South India was at North India's place, Sri Lanka on top of India, and also coastal areas were not as well defined as map 2, and there are many other reasons as well. So now a question: when you hear the word football, what comes to your mind? Now you must be visualizing 11 players on each team playing with a round ball, right? So the word football has different meanings in different parts of the world. For example, in USA, it is generally perceived as American football. In India, what we call football is a game played by two teams of 11 players each. It is called soccer in many other parts of world. In New Zealand, football is generally perceived as rugby, whereas in Australia, football may mean Australian rules football. American football, soccer, rugby, and Australian rules footballs are very different from each other. So, why am I telling you the story? Because I want to highlight the fact that how the same word football can be perceived differently in different parts of the world. Similarly, while studying history, the meaning of some words have changed throughout the years due to various reasons. For example, the Persian language used in ancient times is very different from the Persian that is studied today. Also, the use of various words by people has changed. For example, when you hear the word Hindustan, the first thing that springs to your mind is India, the whole country, because that is what it means, right? From your childhood, you've been told that Bharat, Hindustan, and India are the names of the same country. But in 13th century, Minhaj-e Siraj, who was a chronicler, used it to refer areas of Punjab and Haryana, the lands between Ganga and Yamuna river, and also he used it in a political sense. How? He used it to refer the states or the areas that were a part of Delhi Sultan, meaning those areas which were ruled by the Sultan of Delhi. Also, Minhaj-e Siraj never included South India in Hindustan. So, as you can see, this is quite different from the meaning of Hindustan that we know today. Also, in 16th century, Babur, the Mughal ruler, used Hindustan to describe the geography, the fauna or wildlife, and the culture of India. Also, in 14th century, a poet, Amir Khusru, used the word Hind to describe all this fauna, geography, and culture. So, students, from this story, we understand that how over the years one word Hindustan has had different meanings or different words. Hindustan in 16th century and Hind in 14th century are used to describe the same thing. Now, let's see another story. So, when you hear the word foreigner, what do you think? You think of someone who is not an Indian, right? Someone who has come from another country. But in medieval period, foreigner was any stranger who was not a part of that society. For example, say Ramgarh is a village. Sitapur is another village. So, in medieval times, people of Ramgarh were foreigners to people of Sitapur, and people of Sitapur were foreigners to people of Ramgarh. Similarly, let's consider forest dwellers. Forest dwellers are people who live in forests. So, forest dwellers were foreigners for city dwellers like people of Ramgarh and Sitapur. And people of Ramgarh and Sitapur were foreigners for forest dwellers. Okay? I hope I am clear. Now students, let's study about archives. An archive is a place where documents and manuscripts are stored. Students, remember this definition. It's important and it's given in the back exercise questions as well. So an archive is a place where documents and manuscripts are stored. Now what is a manuscript? Manuscript means a handwritten document, or in modern times it means the original handwritten copy of a book. So now a question may arise. How do historians get to know about the history? What are their sources of information? So, as you may have studied in class 6th, that historians mainly depend on coins, inscriptions, architectures, and textual records. So now let me explain each of them. So as you see, even today, government releases some special coins on some occasions that have, say, Independence Day written on it or so on. So even the rulers used to leave some mark on the coins so as to make sure that they are remembered. Also, they used to inscribe. Inscribe means to write about their achievements on the walls. And as you all know that different rulers had different kind of architectures. For example, you see Mughal architectures like Taj Mahal. So they are a combination of Islamic and Turkish architectures. They built a lot of tombs and mosques. So architecture also helped to know about history. And last and most obvious, textual records, meaning records and documents written by hand. Now, what do you mostly write on? Paper, right? So, why do you write on paper? Why not on any other thing? Well, there are many reasons, but mainly because paper is economical and it is easily available. But before 7th century, paper was very costly, and with time the cost of the paper decreased. So when cost decreased, its usage increased. So people started to use paper more and more. People used paper to write holy text, chronicles of rulers, teachings of saints, and so on. Now let's consider a scenario. Say you are copying your friend's homework, or you are copying your friend's notes. Say your friend has written, God is there to help those who do good deeds. But in a hurry, or say if you didn't understand your friend's handwriting, you wrote, no God is there to help those who do good deeds. So, as you can see, the meaning of the sentence has totally changed. Similarly, let's consider another case. Rahul lives in Hyderabad. His father has been a mayor 3 times. Now, while copying your friend's homework, in a hurry, you wrote, Rahul lives in Hyderabad. His father has been a major 3 times. So you wrote major instead of mayor. So as you can see, again, the meaning of the sentence is completely different. So in earlier times, there were no printing press. So copies of documents and manuscripts were made by hand. So when scribes used to copy manuscripts, unknowingly they introduced small changes. This kept on happening for centuries. So small changes kept on adding up, and eventually what happened? Yes, the text became very different from what it was. A scribe is a person who copies documents. Again, I repeat, a scribe is a person who copies documents. This definition is important. Please note it down. Also, over the time, original copies were difficult to find. So, why they were difficult to find? Because maybe they got lost somewhere, or they were present at one place and people at some other place wanted them, so they were difficult to find. So, historians had to read different manuscript versions of the same text to get an idea of what was exactly written in the original manuscript. For example, if you find something wrong in your friend's notebook while copying, then what do? You refer a couple of more notebooks so that you get an idea of what you should write. Similarly, historians also did that. Now, historians are intelligent people, so with time they keep updating their chronicles or documents. A chronicle is a document that has facts and events written in order of their happening. So, say if A event happened in 1600 and B event happened in 1620, so it will write it in chronological order. That is, the event that happened first will be written first, the event that happened second will be written second, and so on. Similarly, Ziauddin Barani had two versions of his chronicle. The first he wrote in 1356 and later he updated it in 1358. Now, historians knew about his later version, the one that he wrote in 1358, but his earlier version got lost in huge library collections, and historians did not know about his earlier version until 1960s. Sometimes important documents remain buried in the huge collections, which cause a major problem. Now, you must have heard your parents talking about how their childhood was different. So, obviously, if your parents' childhood is different from you, then between 700 and 1750, that is over 1000 years, a lot of things must have changed. New technologies and new crops must have arrived. So, that is the case. New technologies and new crops arrived in the subcontinent during these 1000 years. The main technologies that changed things for good were the Persian wheel in irrigation, the spinning wheel in weaving, and the use of firearms in combat. These technologies were very useful at that time. Also, a lot of new crops also arrived in subcontinent. Subcontinent means the Indian subcontinent. The crops are potatoes, corn, chilies, tea, and coffee. Students, please remember both of these points as these are generally asked in exams. Now, talking about the people who were influential during these 1000 years, the first name that comes to mind is that of Rajputs. The word Rajput is derived from the word Rajputra, meaning son of a king. But between 8th and 14th century, this term was generally used for Kshatriyas. Kshatriyas were warriors, which included rulers, army chiefs, and soldiers. So, people who used to fight battles were called Kshatriyas. Also, Rajputs are especially remembered for their extreme valor, meaning bravery, and loyalty towards motherland. Rajputs were extremely brave and loyal people. There were other groups such as Marathas, Sikhs, Jats, Ahoms, and Kshatriyas, which became prominent. Now, students, how to remember all these names? So, you can use the word mask to remember these names. M stands for Marathas, A stands for Ahoms, S for Sikhs, and K for Kshatriyas. M for Marathas, A for Ahoms, S for Sikhs, and K for Kshatriyas, mask. And charts you have to remember separately. Also, moving forward, as time moved on, there was gradual cleaning up of forests. So earlier, people used to live in forests. A lot of people used to live in forests. So when forests were cleaned up, so forest dwellers had to migrate. Forest dwellers are the people who live in forests. So when people started using land for agriculture, obviously some people had more productive land than others. And as a result, some people were richer than others. So societies started to become differentiated and the concept of jatis became prominent. Jati was nothing but a group of people formed on the basis of their occupation or social status. As you already know, Kshatriyas were warriors, so similarly, there were other jatis as well. Now, there are some important points that you have to remember. Let's discuss them one by one. The status of some jatis varied from place to place. Now, how is this possible? For example, one jati may be considered supreme at one place and very low at some other place. How? To understand this, let's consider a scenario. Say you have three Punjabi friends. All of them are very rich and very kind. So obviously, you will think that all Punjabis are very rich and very kind people. But if your friends are poor and ill mannered, then you will think that all Punjabis are not good. So that is how at that time, based on the status of the people living in an area, the status of jatis varied. Also, every jati formed their own rules and regulations. For example, Brahman considered eating meat to be a crime, or Sikhs always used to wear a turban and used to have long hair, which majority of Sikhs even have today. Also, jatis used to have their own rules and regulations, but they also had to follow the rules of the village. Now, for example, I just told you that Sikhs follow the rules of the jati, that is wearing turban, but they also follow the constitution of India. Similarly, in that time as well, jatis used to follow their own rules as well as the rules of the village. And lastly, jatis were regulated, or we can say controlled, by an assembly of elders called Jati Panchayat. So, I hope the concept of jatis is very well clear to you all. Next, we will study about a Prashasti written for Ghiyasuddin Balban, who was a Sultan of Delhi. Now, a Prashasti is a poem written in praise of someone. So let's study about what's written about Ghiyasuddin Balban. Ghiyasuddin Balban was the Sultan of Delhi from 1266 to 1287 CE. It's written that his vast empire was so huge that it stretched from Bengal in east to Ghazni in west. Ghazni is present in Afghanistan, and it also included all of South India. It is said that some people of Maharashtra, Karnataka, Gujarat, and other regions were so scared of him that they fled before his armies. Although historians say that these claims are exaggerated. Now, moving forward, when you hear the word Rajasthan, what comes to your mind? Deserts, camels, cactus, beautiful colored clothes, and so on, right? Similarly, when you hear the word Kashmir, what comes to your mind? Snow, low temperature, sheep, people wearing woolen clothes, right? And finally, when you hear the word Kerala, what comes to your mind? Coconuts, beaches, beautiful plantation, right? So, the reason I'm discussing all these things with you is because different regions have different geography, culture, and language, which was the case 1000 years ago as well. But today, say in Delhi, we generally eat parathas. But does that mean that we do not eat South Indian food? So, how did this blend of traditions happen? So there were some pan-regional empires. Pan-regional means empires spreading across regions. So these pan-regional empires led to the exchange of cultures between regions. But when Mughal Empire declined in 18th century and smaller regional states regained control, so they still had their shared culture. Even today, if we have different states, it doesn't mean that North Indian food is not served in South India or South Indian food is not available in North India. Cholas, Khiljis, Tughlaqs, and Mughals were pan-regional empires in the medieval times. Now, students, coming to the second last topic, we will study about religions. So, over the 1000 years, from 700 to 1750 CE, there were some major developments in religious traditions. So, let's study how religions changed throughout these 1000 years. Now, some people think of religion as a personal thing. For example, they worship in their homes, but majority of people generally practice religion in a collective way. What does it mean? For example, today you see people going to temples, mosques, gurudwaras, and church together to worship their gods or goddesses. Over the 1000 years, there were some important changes in Hinduism as well. So let's study how the meaning or how the perception of Hinduism changed. Now, Hindus started worshipping new deities, means they started worshipping new gods and goddesses. More temples were constructed by royalty, meaning kings and wealthy people started constructing more temples. Brahmins became dominant groups in society. As you have seen in TV shows as well, that kings used to hold Brahmins in high regard. They used to almost worship them. So, why did Brahmins become so dominant? Because, as you know, most ancient texts, Vedas, Purans, all these are written in Sanskrit. So, the knowledge of Sanskrit earned Brahmins a lot of respect. And also, their patterns consolidated their position. Patterns are wealthy individuals who support another person. Also, the idea of bhakti emerged during this time. Bhakti meant that devotees could reach a personal deity without the aid of rituals or traditions, meaning that by worshipping, meditating, or believing, devotees could reach their personal deity. Now, that is how Hinduism changed. As you know, that a lot of merchants and travelers came to India in search of opportunities. So, they also brought new religions with them. In 7th century, merchants and migrants brought the teaching of Quran to India. Quran is the holy book of Muslims. Muslims accept the sovereignty. Sovereignty means supreme rule of only one God, Allah. They believe that all people who believe in Allah are embraced by His love, mercy, and bounty. So, according to them, if a poor and a rich person believe in Allah, they will be blessed equally. Now, Muslims are also divided into Shia and Sunni Muslims. Shia believe that Muhammad's son-in-law Ali is the true leader of Muslims, whereas Sunni believed that Khalifas should lead them. So that is how Muslims are divided into Shia and Sunni. I hope I am clear. Now, coming to the last topic, we will study about time and historical periods. So, historians do not see time just as a passing of hours, but instead, time reflects social and economic organization. Meaning, with passing of time, we can see that how social and economic factors changed. Now, you must be thinking, how do historians study past? It's huge. We already have over 2000 years in Common Era itself. We are in 2020, so we have 2020 years in Common Era. So historians divide past into large segments called periods like ancient, medieval and modern. So they study time by dividing it into periods. In the middle of 19th century, British historians divided the history of India into three periods: Hindu, Muslim and British. They divided the history on the basis of religion of the rulers, considering that religion was the only important factor that changed, which is obviously wrong. Why? Because such a division completely ignores economy, society, culture, and diversity of this great nation. Therefore, because of these factors, this periodization is hardly followed today. Now, the history that we will study throughout 7th standard is often described as the medieval history. And as we have already seen throughout this chapter, that there was spread of peasant societies, the development of Hinduism and Islam as major religions, and the arrival of European trading companies. Also, as we studied the Persian wheel in irrigation, the spinning wheel in weaving, and the firearms in combat, these were the new innovations. There were some other innovations as well that helped the mankind. Some of these innovations were spectacles or reading glasses, gunpowder, mechanical clock, coffee houses, printing press, and the hourglass that is used to measure time. Throughout these 1000 years, there have been a lot of changes. We will study them in detail in the upcoming chapters. So, students, with that, we have completed chapter 1 of history.